The Cavs are stacking up wins like nobody's business. They're at 29 right now. And certain people are starting to notice that the Cavs are doing what they're doing. Let's listen to Tim Legler on his podcast talk about the Cleveland Cavaliers and hear what he has to say.
In, I don't know, a week or so, week and a half, they are just absolutely incredible. They are, what is it? I have it down here, 10-1 in December, 27-4 overall. And we're far enough into the 31 games into the season, Legs, is a big, good enough sample size. I'm ready to call it. There's nothing fluky about that record, 27-4. They are really good offensively, really good defensively, know who they are, play together, and they are tough. I believe in the Cavs, and I'm curious what you think.
I mean, at this point, they've got me to where, like, I'm not any more skeptical of the hot start they had. Like, they're going to cool off like this. And I'm not saying they're going to sustain the rest of the year at this winning percentage, because you're talking about winning 70 plus games. I don't know they're winning 70 games. Okay. Yeah. And they haven't, look, I'm trying to see, have they really even dealt yet with significant time missed by their top guys? I mean, Mitchell, Garland, 30 games, Allen, 31, Mobley, 29, Ty Jerome, 30, LeVert, 25, Niang, 31, right? So they look, and that's a big part of this league now. Show up with your guys, have them play every night, and you got a chance to win in this league. I don't care who you are, because you're probably facing somebody shorthanded. So they've pretty.
So that is a great point that Tim brings up, right? Because, like, you got to think about changes in the league over time and how those changes have affect what can be possible in the regular season. He brings up, now that we're in this era where, like, there's so much load management going on, you can win a lot of games just by playing hard or having your guys up in the NBA. And that's a fair enough point. Now, I don't think it, like, is the reason the Cavs are 28, like 9-4, right? I think that would maybe explain that the Cavs had like a small increase in win total. But when you're talking about an increase like that, that variable just is not a large enough one for it to justify everything else that the Cavs have done. But it is something to think about. And I think Tim does make a great point there.
For the most part, been very healthy this year. And so you could have chalked it up to that. Well, they got everybody playing and they'll cool off. Now they might miss some extended time at some point. You would think one or two of these guys might miss a chunk of time, and yet maybe you will start to look at their depth. Is there depth enough? But when I just watch what they're doing on both ends of the floor, particularly offensively, I'm a believer now that this is a team that's going to be very difficult to beat. It's particularly we get into a 7-game series. Now, look, Donovan Mitchell can be very streaky in those types of spots. So I think that could still be one thing you'd look at for this team in a playoff series, but their balance has been really good. You look at the number of different areas that they hurt you in on a given night. And some nights they shoot threes at a Boston level. And they did that against Denver really in that game. That was a very Boston-like 3-point shooting performance. They can do that. They've got bigs that can score in the paint on you. They've got isolation, elite isolation play with Mitchell. They've got high-level ball screen play with Mitchell and Garland and LeVert. So they really have a very balanced, well put together team offensively. There's nothing glaring. You look at this team and say they could really use this. They've got pretty much everything. And now it's really clicking. And
so something to add to what Tim's saying. One of the reasons I think like this run from the Cavs is like a lot more legit than what people are giving it credit for is not just the win-loss record, is that some of these trends that we've seen from the Cavs, they're not new. They didn't just come out of nowhere, right? The Cavs have been trending towards this kind of direction over time, right? Like there were spurts of last year when they weren't dealing with injury, when guys were healthy, where the Cavs were very high in defensive efficiency and also offensive efficiency. And this has been kind of a trend for the Cavs, even going back to that season they lost to the New York Knicks. They've developed over time and refined this, and I think Kenny has put the keys to this and made it even cleaner. But this core has been showing you flashes of being capable of what they've been doing over the last few years. And it feels like they're putting it together. And one of the main reasons I think that they're putting it together is because Evan Mobley has become a part of the offensive equation on a consistent basis for this basketball team, which we always kind of knew was the final piece, right? The final infinity stone for the Cavs. The form is like, hey, can Evan Mobley be a bucket getter? Now, he's not there yet, but he's made strides offensively that has made it so that you can put up a bunch of points. You don't have to rely on Donovan Mitchell too much. You can lean on your bench. You can lean on Evan Mobley. You can lean on Darius Garland. It just adds to that winning cocktail that the Cavs are trying to produce.
To whatever extent Kenny Atkinson's responsible, I'd really like to be there on site to be able to tell you more, like at a practice session, a film session, a walkthrough, like really understand like what is it that he has done to bring this out of basically the same group.
Right.
Because this is a whole nother level offensively, and they're good defensively, and they can be very good some nights. To me, this is mostly, Adam, about their offense to this point being fairly unguardable for the rest of the league. No one's really had a response to how to slow this team down.
They're first in offense by 1.5 points.
The situation a lot of people think of, especially in Cleveland, when they look at this is, this is kind of like going from Mark Jackson to Steve Kerr for the Golden State Warriors. Because if you look at the Golden State Warriors win-loss record by the end of the new year, December 31st, January 1st, 2014, with Mark Jackson, they were 20-13, a win percentage of .606. You fast forward 1 year with Steve Kerr, that same day, they're 25-5, a win percentage of .833. And then we jump to the Cavs. We look at what the Cavs were last year on January 1st, right? They had a win percentage last year of .545, 18-15. A lot of that had to do with injury, but then you fast forward to this year, the Cavs have a win percentage of .879, 29-4. It's a similar jump to what the Warriors did that year. Now, I can't speak to what was going on with Mark Jackson that year and what went on with Steve Kerr. Part of it is Kenny Atkinson has put these guys in a better offensive position and has greenlit these guys and just knows how to use them better. Another part of it is, as Tim has mentioned, the Cavs are just much healthier than they were, because when they were healthy last year, they were a really good basketball team. And even if we go back to the playoffs where the Cavs lost to the Boston Celtics in 5, they were incredibly injured by the end of the playoffs, which played a massive role in how the Cavs looked against Boston last year, which wasn't bad. They didn't look terrible versus Boston, but they did run out of juice
per 100 possessions, which is pretty good. Like there's a gap between them and number 2 New York Knicks. And then to your point, first in 3-point field goal percentage by over 2%, third in 3-pointers made, and 46.5% on wide open ones. So they play an old, I say old, like the style of basketball that was most popular about 7 years ago, which is to have a traditional big, set the screen high and then dive hard to the rim, right? So you're right, like teams like the Celtics, they play 5 out, everything's out. They play more 4 out with a diving guy going towards the basket, and it puts a different pressure on the rim. It puts pressure on those rotations backside, and as a result, they just generate all these open threes. But when you talk about Kenny Atkinson and the different things he's done, there are some important things. We talked about it a month ago, how they're using Mobley differently, putting the ball in his hands, playing him in the corner and having him dive, these types of things. But to me, the number one difference with this team is they all have a green light in the best way. You talk about bad shots. Those guys are willing to get shots up when they have a tiny little bit of daylight. And there's so much gravity, extra gravity that's created when Max Strus knows he can come off of a pin down. And if he has a quarter step on his guy, he's going up and letting it fly. They all have that green light, and it means your defense has to constantly jump at them. The defense is constantly jumping out at the perimeter on their guys coming off screens because if they get it off, they're going to hit it. And that's what I love about the team. So many different guys that can make shots, and that's why they score 150 points on a lot of nights.
I will say this, and
I think the person who has benefited the most from Kenny Atkinson being here, it feels like it's Georges Niang, right? Because Georges Niang has no problem pulling the trigger on 3-point attempts. I believe he's number 4 in 3-point attempts on the Cavs, and he's making them at 37%, almost 38%. I think he's benefited the most from this because his willingness to shoot threes is not something that gets him off the floor anymore. Like, I think with JB, that was something that took him off the floor, right? Same thing with somebody like Harris, right? Where Harris shoots too many threes, he don't make enough of them. He's worried about getting taken off the floor. Like, having that pressure be alleviated off of these guys, I think has done a ton. Harris is shooting 47% still, which is insane, right? Ty Jerome is another example because the kind of threes that Ty Jerome takes, not a lot of coaches would let you take those threes. Because, like, Ty Jerome takes Steph Curry threes sometimes where he just, like, come off a screen just, like, fires in the air while moving midair to shoot a three. And he can make those threes, but it's like it's going to be hard to find a coach that's going to let you shoot those threes. But Kenny Atkinson being willing to let that happen has been a good thing for this Cavs team. My only concern with the Cavs this year is, like, how well can we pivot if those shots don't fall, and how fast are we going to pivot, right? Are we going to do the Houston Rockets thing where we just shoot them and shoot them and shoot them and never adjust, even if them threes ain't dropping, and go out like the Chris Paul and the James Harden Rockets went out? Like, is that going to be something that's on the Cavs resume? Or will they be able to say, hey, we're not making these threes, let's adjust? The thing that I've seen that's been super encouraging about this Cavs team is that ability to adjust. Earlier in this show, they were talking about Boston and why people are kind of wrong about Boston not being unbeatable, which is Boston is likely to do that Houston Rockets stuff, right? Where they're just going to shoot these threes no matter what. And Boston has always had this issue, even before they won the championship, of taking these just bad shots all the time. And look, the Cavs take their fair of bad shots in this Kenny Atkinson offense as well. But the question is, okay, when that shot stops falling, do you have a counterpunch to go to? And that's where I think the Cavs have demonstrated they do have that counterpunch, ironically enough, against Boston, right? Didn't shoot as well against Boston that first game. They came back from a 20-point deficit because they went to their counterpunch. I think that's where the Cavs, having Evan Mobley become an offensive threat, really helps them become a team that can move throughout the playoffs, because now that's your answer to, hey, what if the threes aren't dropping? Well, we can use Evan Mobley more. Get Evan Mobley free in the paint. Maybe that opens up things for Jared Allen down the road, or because we have so many guys who can slash, Darius Garland, Karis LeVert, Donovan Mitchell, that's going to open up looks for your centers. That's going to open up looks at the hoop, and the Cavs can adjust that way. That's going to be the big test for them, right? Like, when those threes eventually stop dropping at the rate that they are, you're going to have a series like that where you're just not shooting as well as you would want to. How well can they counterpunch? That's going to be the biggest test for Kenny Atkinson.
I think you're even seeing this reflective in our chat right now. And I'm feeling this because I'm covering the entire league, with what I'm doing. And I don't feel yet like everybody around the country is kind of caught up with this mentality about them. Like, man, I just think that people are still have not paid enough attention to them, haven't seen them play enough, because I think there's a lot of people with opinions on them that haven't really watched them. And I'm not talking about a game because they played your favorite team, okay, and so you watch them. I'm talking about watching this team for a number of games and a sample size. If you watch them every 10 days to this point in the season and getting a sample size for what they're about, and you don't think this team is just like right now an offensive force, then you're ignorant to it, or you don't like them, or you just don't know what you're watching. Because I do feel like the people that are super bought in live in Cleveland, and like everybody else is kind of like not really talking about it. Now, part of it is because I think the national narrative is always like sexier storylines, either good or bad. We tend to focus on those. And maybe people don't put Donovan Mitchell in that category of star that gets all that attention all the time. Like, these other teams have a guy like that you're always dying to talk about. Maybe Mitchell doesn't generate that for whatever reason. He's clearly their best player. So But for me, when I've seen Adam is a team very unselfish, very free, and very complete.
Now, make sure you guys check out the rest of that video because he has like a whole 30 minutes. I'll try to link it in the description down below, talking about that on the All NBA podcast. Make sure y'all check that out. But he makes a great point. Like, I see so many takes about the Cavs that I just feel like can only be takes you have if you are either ignorant to the full scope of what it is the Cavs are doing this year, or you just simply don't watch. You kind of like watch a couple of highlights, you look at the box scores, but you're not watching because you like love bad. You're just watching because like you want to argue about certain things, and this is your way of backing up those arguments. It feels like the people who don't believe in the Cavs don't believe in them because they just are ignorant of them. But like if they watch them, they understand what's going on here, right? Like I hear the comparison to the Atlanta Hawks, but the Cavs have a star in Donovan Mitchell that's unlike anything that the Hawks had, right? The big question with the Hawks and why they weren't a real playoff contender was because the Hawks had nobody who could get the ball at the end of the game and get a bucket. Like that just wasn't what they had, right? Especially that Hawks team that everybody else talks about, right? It was like Jeff Teague and DeMar Carroll, right? So that's just a bad comp. And then people will bring up other teams. Like I saw somebody bring up the Utah Jazz the one year that the Jazz got the 1 seed. Tim hits it right on the head. A lot of people have opinions about the Cavs that they're just kind of lazily coming up with because they don't really have any way to watch them because the Cavs aren't on national TV as much. So it's up to the Cavs to get to the playoffs and make sure everybody lets them know in the proper venue. But that to me kind of hits it right on the head because everybody who's watched this team in depth, they walk away going, damn, that's a good team. Right, you talk about JJ Redick, what he said at the end of the game of when the Lakers played against us. We heard Draymond Green after he experienced it was like, nah, that's a real contender, right? Like that's a legit squad right there, and that was early into the win streak. Everybody who actually like digs into the Cavs tells you exactly what it is. This team's good, and it's not just like because they went on the win streak. I remember hearing Brian Windhorst rave about this team in the offseason. Like during training camp, he's like, no, this is going to be a really, really good team. And Brian Windhorst the last couple of years was pretty was pretty bare on the Cleveland Cavaliers. And then this offseason, he just saw what it was with Kenny Atkinson. He was like, nah, they're going to be really good. Everything's pointing to it. You don't become a 29 win and a 4-loss team by accident. Cavs are doing this. They're a legit team. They're a legit NBA champion contender. Now they got to do the work, right? We're not going to crown them as champions just because they won a bunch of games before the start of January. But they deserve the respect and credit they should be getting right now. And I'm happy to see people like Tim Legler be willing to give that respect to the Cavs. But let me know what you guys think in the comment section down below. Y'all have a great day. Have an even better night. Peace.